This is Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
I got me a rock and roll band, it's a fever on.
Gotta love it, everybody. Ted Nugent, Cheap Trick, Molly Hatchet, Poison, just a sampling of some of the music our next guest has had a hand in bringing into this world to all of us.
He spent 4 decades in the recording industry, working with some of the biggest rock bands in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Working in A&R, which stands for Artist and Repertoire, he discovered, signed, and produced REO Speedwagon, Ted Nugent, Cheap Trick, and Molly Hatchet. Carol, he later produced albums for Blue Oyster Cult, Motley Crue, Twisted Sister, and Poison.
Yeah, an iconic music label. Many others as well. He produced 23 gold or platinum selling albums that cumulatively sold more than 52 million copies. He's got a new book out. It's called Turn It Up, My Time Making Hit Records in the Glory Days of Rock Music. Tom Werman is the former music industry executive and producer who wrote the book. He joins us on Zoom from Lenox, Massachusetts. Hey, Tom. So looking forward to talking to you. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
We're doing okay. Trying to keep up with what we thought would be a quiet news week, but it's not even close. Want to talk about your 4 decades. Iconic rock and hard rock bands. We just listed some of them. Take us to the beginning, because New England prep school, Ivy League education, you got an MBA, advertising, could have had a job at P&G. Take us to the beginning and how it all started.
Well, I wasn't very happy. I didn't know what I was doing, choosing the advertising agency over CBS Records. It was they paid a little better, so I was very unhappy. I was assigned to the Procter & Gamble account group, and I was in charge of writing marketing plans for Gain detergent and then Jif peanut butter. You know,
Score.
Yeah. And at the end of the year, I was really not happy. And I had seen some very, landmark concerts. And I was a musician, and I had a great band. And I was thinking about getting into the music business. I just could not really envision spending my life without rock music. When since I heard Elvis in 1954, that was really it for me. So I wrote a letter to Clive Davis, which was a cheeky thing to do, I think. And I told him in the letter that I would call his office to arrange an appointment. And you don't do that to Clive. You let him arrange the appointment. Anyway, I started interviewing at CBS Records, which was the home of Columbia label and Epic label. And I finally got to see Clive, and he hired me on the spot. And I went from hell to heaven overnight.
Wait, so did the letter work? Like, did that initial letter get you that initial? It did. Love it.
Yeah, the letter's reprinted in the book as it was written. It's the actual letter. And one fortunate thing is that it was a time when they could hardly make records fast enough to satisfy the demands. Well, so they were hiring.
Certainly a different era. I mean, instead of discovering folks on YouTube or TikTok, and we're going to get to that a little bit later, you were having to actually do the shoe leather work and going and finding these artists. So you're in your 20s, you show up at the label. How do you get your first big break?
Well, 2 months in, after I started working, I heard the acetate that this independent engineer brought me. He had recorded REO Speedwagon at his house in Connecticut, and there were 2 songs on there that I thought were outstanding. And I flew out to Champaign, Illinois, to see the band, because it's, you say that there was shoe leather involved and that it was work, but really, it was a lot of fun. Flying was really enjoyable back then. And, they gave me a credit card and said, go find hits. So it was pretty
Unbelievable.
comfortable flying around the country and seeing bands when you thought that there might be, some potential there.
It's a little
So,
different than marketing peanut butter.
yeah, yes, marketing peanut butter, and it's also quite different from discovering bands by using algorithms and looking on social media. We heard it. If we liked it, we went to see it, and they were a wonderful band, and I signed them. So after that, I tried to sign Kiss, Leonard Skinner, and Rush, and I was turned down on all of them. Eventually, the people at the label said, I think maybe Werman knows something that we don't, and then they let me sign Ted Nugent.
But
And then we were off.
what was interesting, though, even after your first big discovery of REO Speedwagon, like you still had to prove yourself, and you make note of that, right? That you talked about Kiss, Rush, and Leonard Skinner, and yet they were all rejected by your boss, right?
Right. He was a smart guy, a great guy. I loved working for him. But
He was wrong, right?
well, he didn't have a rock and roll head. He liked a lot of other kinds of music, and I was really the rock and roll guy. I was trying to introduce epic records to hard rock or power pop, whatever you want to call it. And after I signed Ted, and I went into the studio and kind of horned in on the creative process, and they gave me co-producer credit, and then I was a producer. Abracadabra.
Explain what a producer did then and what a producer does now.
Oh, I don't know what they do. Now they make beats, and they use samples, and they use keyboards and computers. Way back when, in the 1970s, a producer did literally everything from the beginning of the album to the delivery of the album. So you would work with the band, pick the material, rehearse, rearrange stuff, hire the studio, hire the engineer, set everybody up, choose the mics, choose the position, maybe change the snare drum head, do every single thing. Wherever there was a decision to be made, you were part of that. Now the band hired you, so people think that the producer was a dictator. He's not. He's a collaborator, ideally, and the producer is hired to help the band realize its musical vision. You choose the performances, you make edits, you combine things, you tell people when the performance was the best.
Yeah.
And you edit, you mix the record, which is tough, and then you master it, and then you deliver it, and then you go on to the next project.
I mean, when you do feedback or when you say, maybe you want to do this, I mean, is it always easy or is it sometimes difficult?
Well, you suggest things nicely, and you try them. The band will try them, and if they're reasonable, and usually they work, and we will adapt and we'll make a little change or an improvement. Sometimes it doesn't work, and then you simply don't do it, but you don't tell the band what they're going to do.
Let's get back to Tom Werman. As we said, spent 4 decades in the recording industry, worked with some of the biggest rock bands of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. He's got a new book that reveals it all. Turn It Up, My Time Making Hit Records in the Glory Days of Rock Music. And he's still with us on Zoom from Lenox, Massachusetts. So Tom, is it like Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll? What was it like? Take us back to the 70s or the 80s. What was it like out there in LA and being in this industry, in this business?
Well, it was life in the fast lane generally.
Well said.
The book does deal with rock and roll and some drugs. No sex in the book.
It's a family book.
I'm sorry, that probably puts a damper on sales, but no, LA was the place to make records. It was sunshine and beautiful people and a lot of ease. You could get anything you wanted right away if you needed it in the studio, from equipment to musicians. It was the best. And there were probably 30 recording studios out there to choose from. And I went out there with Cheap Trick to make In Color, and I said, wow, I could live here. And I went back to New York, and I told Epic that I said I'd be much happier making records in Los Angeles. And they said, we'll move you. So they moved us. They were great. And God, it was wonderful. I never experienced any traffic because I went to work at noon and came back at midnight.
That's pretty amazing. Living in LA and not experiencing traffic, that's a unique experience. Hey, Tom, why did you leave LA? Just out of curiosity. I know at the end of your recording career, you decided to open a bed and breakfast in Massachusetts, but so many people who went out west in the 70s and 80s ended up, planting down new roots there and staying.
Well, we did raise a family there. I was there for 23 years. And, I think that if you don't need to be in LA, you probably shouldn't at this point. Back then, I just needed to reinvent myself because the music had changed. I was 55 years old, and I didn't think I should be making records for teenagers at that point. And I was very heavily associated with hair bands and hard rock. And Seattle, I don't think any Seattle bands were that anxious to work with, a producer who had worked with Twisted Sister and Motley Crue, because I think they thought that it would have damaged their street credibility. So I decided to get up and go instead of to stay there and wallow in my frustration and unemployment. And I closed it out. 52 records.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
Incredible records.
Burnt. I was pretty burnt at that point. So we came here, and this is heaven on earth right here. It's beautiful country. We opened up a luxury bed and breakfast, which was a kind of a new concept, and we had a ball. We won awards, and my wife and I, and then we sold it 3 years ago, and moved up the street, and I am blissfully retired.
Now you just are doing annoying interviews with people like us, which we certainly appreciate. Hey,
Speak
Tom.
for yourself. I'm not annoying.
Tom, I'm really interested in what you think about music today. You were talking just now about a transition in your career when you were 55, sort of the move from rock and roll and hair bands to grunge, the Seattle movement in the 90s, Nirvana and bands like that. What's happening right now from, I guess we could call you like an outsider's insider. What's your perspective right now?
Well, I know very little about what's going on today. My son works in A&R at Warner Records in LA.
Wow.
And we talk, I try to find out how they do their job. It's quite different, and so is the recording industry. Everything is, if you can play keyboards and run a computer, you can make records in your bedroom, or music in your bedroom. And it's all perfect. It's all digital. I don't think you'll ever hear another flat or sharp note from a vocalist. You won't hear any mistakes. And I preferred, human beings playing real music, warts and all. I just find that I can listen to music that's 40 years old, and it still inspires me. I have a 4-hour playlist of music from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the classic rock era. And I take it to the gym on my phone, and it works every time.
Do you listen to anything from today?
No, I really don't unless I have to, which means I go into a drugstore or a supermarket, and sometimes there's a classic rock playlist, which is fine. Other times there is music that I find unrecognizable. It's rhythmic entertainment. I hate to do this, but I channel my parents, and I want to say, you call that music? So,
did you say Muzak? I just want to check. Did you say that?
I have we listened to the music. They look at it a lot now because it's on a screen, and they can take sections of it and move it. It just doesn't do it for me. And also, I think age has something to do with it.
No, that's fair. Listen, this was really fun, and I hope we can talk again in the future, because it is interesting to hear the history. And you had a front seat at so many iconic rock bands that are still being played. So it's pretty cool stuff. Tom Werman, thank you so much. Have a good holiday. His new book out, Turn It Up, My Time Making Hit Records in the Glory Days of Rock Music. And he did it in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So he's seen quite a lot.
Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. Ted Nugent, Cheap Trick, REO, Speedwagon.
Everything.
Pretty wild stuff.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, you're listening and watching Bloomberg Businessweek.